You cheated twice, and he has documentation for both incidents. This isn't a no-fault state. He can charge you with adultery if you insist, and you'll end up with a lot less, and I'll still have to pay. Agree. She countersued for mental cruelty and claimed I had my own affairs with Shanana and Brenda. Bob's ex-wife Brenda threatened to sue her for slander and defamation of character. Shanana showed up at her door and told her there would be trouble if she didn't stop. It won't really be me. I have a lot of friends left from my old unit, and believe me when I tell you this, we're a bunch of mean. I won't even talk about what the guys can do to you. I see a lot of mugging in your future.
Damn, it turns out the Blues Brothers were onto something. It's more cost-effective to support her. With my own business and her not working, alimony was inevitable. I adore my 2 daughters more than anything, but the pain of alimony combined with hardly seeing them was unbearable. On top of that, if she wanted to play hardball, she could take half of my business for alimony, leaving me with just 30% of my earnings to survive on. I left the lawyer's office feeling utterly defeated, as usual. Charlene was already ahead of me when I caught up with her, her words cutting through the air. I've been managing this for 8 months now, and it hasn't been detrimental to us. He satisfies me, no more, no less, just differently. I couldn't choose between you two if I had to. But think long and hard before you make any decisions. Consult a lawyer. Your life will be a living hell if we split up, I'll ensure that, she warned. I gazed at her, bewildered, as she calmly detailed what seemed like my future. Who was this woman? Could she truly be my wife, the person I've shared my life with for 14 years, the one I've relied on and trusted more than anyone else? At least now I won't have to sneak around. You'll still be my priority, but I won't neglect Jim either. He has needs just like you. We'll figure out a schedule, she said, but those were the only words I heard before I stood up and left. She trailed after me, protesting, until we reached the street, where she fell silent upon seeing Mrs. Roseman, our elderly neighbor. I exchanged pleasantries with Mrs. Roseman, while Charlene turned back to the house, whispering, "Get back here now." She watched me depart. I had been absent for 2 days. The smug look on her face upon my return nearly made me reconsider. The girls were completely enamored with me, and I loved them until bedtime. They were growing up fast. They were 13 and 11. After I saw the lawyer, I decided I would stay out of the way for now. She brought me a beer after they fell asleep. I put it on the table. I'll be damned if I'll ever drink anything she gives me again. I'm glad you came to your senses. I knew you would. We'll live our lives the same as before, and no one will know anything. The only thing that will change is that I have a date one weekend, and I'll be coming home really late, but I'll be home, so don't worry the girls, she said, leaning back in her chair, a familiar smug expression on her face. I quickly knocked it off her face with the speech I'd rehearsed. Who says I've come to my senses? Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to live here for the next 4 years and 8 months until Marissa turns 18, and then I'll be gone. Darcy will be a little over 16, so she'll hopefully be fine. Maybe she'll decide to come live with me. Either way, I'll be gone. I paused to catch my breath and started again before she could respond. Now, sloppy seconds will be in my past. If you dumped that tomorrow, I still wouldn't share a bed with you. It's gone forever. I have a habit of not sleeping with a woman who has fun with other men while married. That is exactly that. I am moving into a spare bedroom and will not discuss the matter any further. However, I do not plan to remain and sell AIT. I have my own needs, and while I won't be looking, at least for a while, I won't refuse if offered. Unless she is married, I would never do to some poor soul what you are doing to me. Also, you better get a job or have your lover pay for your needs. The girls will get whatever they want, but anything above living expenses will never go into our joint checking account again. I knew that last word hit me hard. Charlene had never seen a sale she didn't like. Her closets, yes, plural, contained clothes she never wore. She was gradually turning pale, but now she was furious. You know I still love you and want to share a bed with you. This is just ridiculous. Things are going to stay the way they are, that's not an option. Now, go get ready for bed. You know if things don't work out with your mistress, you'll be popular at Patterson and Maine. Maybe you should think about that when you run out of play money. On the corner of the street in our small town, men would gather to find a date for the night. She ran off to the bedroom, remembering to lock the door. I waited a few minutes and opened it. She was lying on the bed with the phone in her hand, startled. She dropped the phone, and I, realizing who she was talking to, snatched it back. "Hey, I have your number. I'll have your address soon. Maybe I'll track you down sometime, and we can talk about what we have in common. Don't worry about me hurting you. Of course, you won't want to have a permanent relationship with her, knowing that she'll cheat on her lover at the first opportunity." He hung up, and I put the phone in my pocket. She had already recovered and was about to leave when the girls showed up. They looked at the cracked door frame and asked what was wrong. "Oh, you know, that door has been sticking lately. I think it's attracting moisture somehow. I'll fix it tomorrow, and you guys go to bed," I said. Charlene didn't utter a word when they left. She started to go in, but I stopped her. "I'll keep your phone until tomorrow, and yes, I'll be checking your account on the computer. Good night," she hissed at me as I walked away. "Good luck to you. My accounts are locked up tighter than Fort Knox." "You're not getting anything," I grinned, knowing she'd forgotten about the keystroke logger we'd installed on the computer as soon as the kids were old enough to use it. I locked myself in my room, activated it, and pretty soon the printer was working. I had to add paper, but I got all her emails, all her search terms, and everything she had bought in the last year. She was stupid beyond belief. Better yet, he worked for the county as a permit checker. They met when Charlene went to get a permit to build my workshop, which was code word for man cave whenever the estrogen in the house got too strong. I would sequester myself in it, playing pool or watching sports on the 50-inch TV. I even had cable TV hooked up. She had to come back twice when I added things, which led to flirting, coffee, lunches, and she didn't seem to fight it much. In some cases, she took the lead. I locked up all the printouts, sent the photos and videos to my personal office computer, and went to bed, falling asleep surprisingly soundly. I got up wide awake, at least it seemed that way to the girls, and made breakfast while they chatted about school, boys, music, boys, which boy band was the cutest, and which boy band had the best songs. It all blended together, and I hardly paid attention. After all, they were too young to seriously do anything about it. Thank God. Marissa, a 13-year-old girl, was starting to develop, and the boys noticed it. We let her walk with groups, supervised by one parent or the other, of course. They would pair up, and we would let them, as long as they didn't do anything stupid. We did this in hopes that when they finally reached the age to date, they would have a little experience to lean on and not do anything stupid. Darcy, or Echo as we called her because everything Marissa said she repeated, at 11, was still too young for such outings, but we made sure they had plenty of opportunities for supervised socializing. This was all on top of sports practice, dance lessons, band, and drama club. One or the other car was always on the move. They were discussing their afternoon classes when I dropped the first bombshell. "Sorry, girls, I have new responsibilities at work, so Mom will be your main chauffeur for a while since she's not working. I'm sure she'll be able to be there for you, right, sweeties?" If looks could kill, I would have been reduced to a pile of ashes. Instead, she told the girls that they might have to ride with their friends sometimes. Why? What could be so important that you would leave your children to their own devices? If you need something done, you have all morning, don't you girls? They instantly agreed. Yeah, Carol's mom is kind of creepy, and Jenny's dad is staring at us. Please, Mom, Charlene was puzzled, and she didn't relent until they left. It seems I was right, all her little dates happened during the day. Her lover had to work. She started as soon as they got on the bus. If you're thinking that's it, that's the difference between you and me, I think, and it usually comes with a big head. Lately, all your mental functions seem to be centered in your ass. Better start using your head while you still have a chance, kids. One more thing before I go. I hooked the house up to sound and video. Get that in here, and it'll all be online in an hour. Damn the consequences. Have a good day. She was still trying to talk when I walked out the door. Over lunch, I watched the videos, watching her freak out, ranting, and trying to find the cameras. Luckily, even I didn't know where they were. The guy who installed them for me said if I knew, I could give them away. I did manage to listen to an interesting phone conversation, though, several actually. The first was addressed to her lover. He's being a total baby. He's ruined our afternoon, and he says he's going to pull the plug. I checked this morning, and he's canceled all my cards. Our bank balance is $280, and the $200 electric bill is due today via automatic transfer. We may have to resort to Plan B. He seemed uncomfortable with Plan B, whatever it was. Before we go that route, let's give it a few days to cool off. If we drop them now, I'll be on the hook just as badly as hubby, so we won't gain anything. Obviously, that wasn't the answer she'd hoped for. So much for love, huh? You solved the problem by allowing everything. How the hell am I supposed to do that? He protested loudly. I do love you, but let's be practical. If we leave our spouses, everyone will know why. We'll be broke. You don't have a job, and mine is nothing to brag about. That way, until we pull the trigger, we'll be living in nice houses. You'll have everything you want, including me. We need to take it slow. I know he's ruined your afternoon, but could meet at lunch. It won't be ideal, but we can make it last. Where can we meet? He ditched me, so I can't pay for a motel room, and I'm not sleeping with you in your office. Let's do it at your place. Not a good idea. I can't find anything, but he says the house is wired, and if we meet here, it'll be on some amateur site in less than an hour, and I believe him. No, we just have to stop and give him a chance to calm down. Things got a little heated after that, and when they finished talking, she sat there with a confused look on her face. Perhaps the perfect life she had envisioned for herself had been stifled by reality, but I knew her, and realized that if she had made a decision, hell would freeze over before she changed it. So stubborn was she. I smiled when I checked on her later. She was sitting at her computer, having just realized I had locked her out. Bastard, she yelled. After about 15 minutes, bastard, she listed all the swear words. I was a little impressed. I didn't realize she knew so much. I decided to tease her a little and called her, but before she could speak, I started the conversation. Hi honey, I said, my words literally oozing sarcasm. Are you having a good day? You don't have to fiddle with your computer anymore if your words are to be believed. I have it locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Oh, another tidbit for you, by the end of the day, your phone will be disconnected. But don't worry, I ordered you a new one. It'll be here tomorrow. I hope you like it, you bastard, was all she had time to say before I hung up. The rest I heard through the surveillance equipment my geek buddy had set up while she was having fun with Loverboy just after I discovered them. She smiled when I gave her the new best-in-class phone that night, and the next day I heard her rant in real time when she tried to use it. It had a safety feature designed for children, which was very helpful to me. She could only call the school, my office, my personal phone, our doctors, her mother, my parents, and 911. Any attempt to call any other number would cause the phone to disconnect for 30 seconds, after which it would reboot. She discovered this as soon as she tried to call her lover. After the phone rebooted, I called her. Hi, I guess you've already guessed that the phone doesn't work except for preset numbers. It's kind of hard to get in touch with a sweetheart without a phone and a computer. I'd apologize, but unlike you, I'm not in the habit of lying. Now that you have a free day and half a day, I have a suggestion: get a goddamn job. You'll need one if you want to go shopping. I'll buy the kids whatever they need, but you're on your own. Maybe you'll finally wear those clothes that still have tags on. I hung up the phone again before she started something interesting. When I got home, it was very frosty. She had a hard time controlling herself around the girls, but once she was sure they were asleep, we went to the basement where she screamed and threatened all sorts of nasty things until she ran out of breath. All I did was smirk. Deciding to change tactics, she burst into tears. "Please, honey, stop being mean to me. I don't deserve it. Please understand, I didn't do it on purpose. It just happened. He's just a fling. I'm sure sooner or later, we'll get tired of each other and I'll go back to loving only you. It didn't hurt you before you found out, and it won't hurt you now. It's only a few hours a week. The rest of the time, I'm all yours. Come to bed with me tonight. Let me prove to you how much I still love you." I think I shocked her when I laughed. You know, I looked on the computer for excuses for cheating. You know, one website offers a book called The Cheater's Handbook. It gives all kinds of advice on how to handle affairs and has a whole section on how to deal with the consequences if your spouse finds out. You just used a lot of excuses. It just happened. It's not going to affect us. It's just an affair. It'll be over soon. And the best part is threatening to destroy his world if he doesn't agree. I watched the conflicting emotions run across her face. Before she could speak, I started again. Let's stop for a moment. Let's say I agree to your program. What does that do for me? I will still pay all the bills, do all the things a married person does. The only difference is that I will have to share with you. I have to say, as a businessman, that doesn't sound very lucrative to me, does it? You get to have fun with someone else, and I just work and wait for you. That's not going to happen. Since you've announced an open marriage, I'll be looking. There's this really nice sales rep who comes in once a month. She's a gym rat and runs marathons. She showed me a picture of her during her last race. I think when she comes in next week, I'll take her out to lunch and see if she's interested. I know she sees my ring, but I'll just explain that we have an open marriage and you've had a lover for almost a year now. Who knows, she seems like a pretty liberal girl. I knew the jab about solids had hurt her. After having 2 kids in a few years, she was a little rounder and a lot softer than she had been when we got married. Of course, all she had to do was get off her butt and go to the gym instead of the mall. Yeah, it was bound to happen. She looked shocked. Why? Why do you need someone else when I'm still here? You have to understand, honey. I still love you, and the thought of being with someone else upsets me. I answered her in the same way. I've been faithful for 16 years, but that wasn't enough for you, was it? Do you think I jumped for joy when I found out you were having fun with me? There's a word for guys who let their women have fun with others while remaining faithful, just as there's a name for women who have fun with their husbands. The Bite Express is officially derailed. Woman might want to think about that. I'm going to bed. At least one of us has to work. For now, she was still hissing as I left. Not being a complete idiot, I knew I needed a plan and fast before she really started trying to ruin my life. I had an old friend, our neighbor's son, who was a bit socially awkward as a kid. We were the only guys on the street, so we gravitated towards each other and even became friends. He was mildly autistic, high-functioning, and had a bit of a knack for computers and abstract problem solving. If anyone could find a solution to my problems, it was him. He had been developing computer games since he was 14 and had sold his first one at 16. Now he was in his 30s, still living with his mom and dad in a 10,000-foot mansion. His fortune was somewhere around $60 million, and thanks to the success of his new game, he was literally rolling downhill. Oddly enough, he was married to another high-functioning autistic woman who I had introduced him to a few years ago at one of the few parties I threw. She was the daughter of one of my biggest clients and usually led an almost reclusive lifestyle. But after spending most of the day at the spa, she insisted that her father bring her, telling him that something important was going to happen. Although God had been a little stingy when it came to her brain, he made up for it with her body and face. She was insanely beautiful. Glancing at my friend Harry, she took his hand and asked, "The 17th of June?" He just nodded and continued talking to another guest for another minute before tapping his glass to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite you all to our upcoming wedding. The date is June 1st, and it will take place at, he looked at June, and she smiled, taking his hand, Emmanuel Lutheran Church on 2nd Street in Broadville. Harry just nodded until someone asked him to introduce his fiancée and tell them how they met. He blushed slightly when she answered, "Again, I'm June Allison, and we met right here in this house at a party." That was the whole story, except she didn't say it happened right now at this party. She told him what kind of ring she wanted, and the next day, he handed her a credit card. She took it from there. They had been together for 8 years, their daughter was 7 years old, and my girls cherished and nurtured her like she was the little sister they dreamed of having. It wasn't unusual for me to come home and see an Lexus SUV in the driveway and the driver waiting patiently in the kitchen, drinking coffee and talking to Charlie. At my appearance, she brightened, smirking. Shanana was a black woman, very attractive, ex-military, having served 2 combat tours and holding black belts in 3 different disciplines. She was on a local law enforcement-sponsored pistol team and regularly won trophies. At one time, she worked for me. I thought she was brilliant and very good at what she did, but I could tell she was bored to tears most of the time. One day, June came by to talk to me about some social event they were having. She showed up unannounced, as was her habit, and I was in a meeting, so Shanana kept her company. By the time I got out of the meeting, I had lost an employee. Everyone ended up with a win-win. Shanana had taken up residence in the mansion, in a small apartment with a separate entrance. For all their wealth, Harry and June didn't go out much, and Shanana was about to quit again due to boredom when some junkie decided it would be a good idea to kidnap some rich guy's kid for money. He succeeded for about 3 minutes, after which Shanana blew his head off as he tried to carry a drug star off the property. The case was hushed up, but he was armed, and surveillance footage shows him waving a shotgun around, trying to carry the child away. She was let off with a warning, and from that day on, she became a bodyguard nanny for Star. A couple of times, the girls went on vacation with them to exotic places. We were invited, but Charlene always found a reason for us to stay home. Harry was surprised, but June wasn't. I saw it coming. She seemed distracted the last few times I was around her, and at our last party, I caught her in the garden sitting very close to another guest. She recoiled when I saw them, and I had a feeling I had just missed her kissing him. When she saw me, she almost ran back into the house, and she stuck to me like glue for the rest of the evening. I wanted to say something, but what? Maybe she was kissing some guy, maybe she wasn't. It wasn't enough. I thought back to that night. At events like this, we usually split up, enjoying the opportunity to socialize with different people. I noticed her absence but assumed she was in another part of the house. As she suddenly appeared and stayed by my side for the rest of the evening, they pondered over my problem, and we had a long conversation. "What exactly do you want, Jack?" "First of all, I want my girls in my life. That's the most important thing to me. Beyond that, I want her to regret what she did. It's over between us. She doesn't realize it yet, but when she does, I fully expect things to be awful. I don't want to find myself without money and alone when the dust settles." Nodding, he asked, "How big is my house?" They'd been there often enough to know, but he didn't ask as if he had no idea. We got the house at a very favorable price. It was in an older neighborhood with a large lot and lots of mature trees. We bought it for about 60% of the usual value because the owner was elderly and didn't care for it. She got enough from the sale to live out her days in a nice retirement home, and I got a 4,400 feet 2-story house with a full basement. We bought it when the girls were very young, so it was the only home they had ever known. For 5 years, we spent every spare dime we had on restoring it, and now it was worth twice what we had put into it. Charlie loved the place, and I knew she would do everything she could to keep it after our divorce. Things cleared up a bit when he asked about the basement. For all the work we had done on the house, we had left the basement alone, with a vague idea of renovating it so the girls could entertain their friends there sometime later. By my calculations, the basement was almost 1,100 feet. "Remodel it, Jack." Make it into a nice apartment, even put in a separate driveway and do separate wiring. That way, it will be completely autonomous from the rest of the house. And then move in. If you divorce, you'll have your own home and full access to the kids. How can she object? Your lives will be completely separate. You will never have to see her unless you want to. I can't see any sane judge objecting to this plan, especially when children are involved. Man, why didn't I think of that? Because I'm a regular guy, that's why, not some autistic people with a collective IQ in the stratosphere. Shauna offered another option. I can kick her ass. I can kick his ass. I can screw up their lives in ways you can't even imagine, and it won't have anything to do with you in any way. Wow, that's some fire in his eyes. I have a feeling that if I take her out, it's going to get really, really ugly. Let's go with Plan C, Shauna. I don't mind her being in a little pain, but she's the mother of my children. We do this first, okay? She didn't like it but agreed, then went to check on the kids. She's got a little crush on you, Jack. Be careful now that you're about to be a bachelor. She's thinking about all sorts of things. I looked at June in surprise. I had always liked Shauna, but I had no idea she had these feelings. Anyway, it was pretty simple. The house was in my name only, which was necessary since I was the only one receiving income at the time of purchase. I consulted with several contractors and architects before I found the plan I liked best. On the advice of a lawyer, I tempered Charlie's fervor a bit by giving her an allowance. Not unlimited, but enough to go out to lunch with her friends and do a little shopping. I also took her Mercedes in for repairs, installing a GPS and anti-theft system. With it, I could remotely shut off the engine from my phone or computer. I noticed that her lunches had become a bit long and drawn out. She would have lunch with friends and then slip away to a friend's house to spend an hour or two in the bedroom with her lover. The next time she drove to lunch, I followed the GPS, and as soon as she headed toward her love nest, I shut the car off. She called me in a panic. Jack, the car is stalled and won't start. I'm stuck. Where are you? She had to tell me where she was, across town from our house. What are you doing there? I was going to stop by Beverly's. We went shopping the other day, and I left my bag in her car. Isn't Beverly at work? Yes, but she left the bag in the garage. I savored the moment. Try starting the car again, Charlie. I bet it'll start right up. She did and drove about 5 blocks before she stalled again. When she called back, I told her that the best thing she could do was try to get home. She didn't immediately understand but drove home, surprised that the car never shut off. When it happened 2 more times, she realized what was wrong. I later recorded her screaming tirade, including her telling Marissa to get the hell out of the room when she tried to calm her down. The look of hurt in our child's eyes calmed her down, but the damage was done. Things were pretty calm between them after that. When she asked about the basement, I said it was finally time to set it up for the girls. They would soon be at the age where they would need space. She took that as me agreeing with her lifestyle. Charlie spent some of her money to buy a phone I found and put a bug on it. Looks like trouble was brewing in paradise. Apparently, they were planning to leave their spouses and settle into domestic bliss in my house, with me paying most of the bills. My behavior had caused some confusion in their plans. Maybe we should call the whole thing off, at least for a while. He's not reacting the way we'd hoped, and I'm afraid he's going to do something drastic, he snorted derisively. He's just a weakling. You're holding him by the hair because of the kids. You know he won't do anything to hurt them, she sighed. Maybe not them, but us for sure. I've seen him at work, and he can be very ruthless when he needs to be. He's made my life very difficult, but he hasn't done anything drastic yet. You're a different matter. You have a very public job. You work for the county. A county official having an affair with the wife of a prominent local businessman is newsworthy. When the paper gets wind of it, you'll be on your ass before the ink is dry. And where would we be then? How would you explain it to your wife? Or have you already told her you're leaving her for another woman? There was a rather long silence, and there was a distinct note in her tone when she spoke. I thought I wasn't the man to tell her before my husband does. And just because he hasn't jumped you yet doesn't mean he won't. He'll just analyze every fact he can get his hands on and hit you where he knows it will hurt the most. You better be ready because it's going to happen. Now, I don't want to see you for at least a month. We both need to think, and I need to repair as much of my relationship with my husband as possible. If we break up, I want him to be in as forgiving a mood as possible and not going to push him too hard. He will be as fair as he can be, especially with the girls. I mean it, a month, and I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. Well, I had just been given the gift of a full month to finalize my plans. I decided to use that time wisely. The first thing I did was set up a meeting with the chairman of the county commission. He and my father had been together for a long time, not as friends, but as business partners. He figured it had something to do with my business and agreed to meet me for dinner. We met at an upscale steakhouse outside of town, and I made sure he ate well and had a few drinks before getting down to business. I'm thinking of moving my business, Fred. Hanover County has been sniffing around. They have a lot of vacant buildings that would suit my needs, and they're offering some very good tax incentives. Fred immediately frowned. The thought of 89 jobs leaving his district was not a pleasant one, especially considering that a few months ago we'd been in the papers about my expansion, which had left me needing another 30 or so employees. That wouldn't look good, especially in an election year. Why? Why would you want to do that? The county has always had a good relationship with you. I don't know what to say, Jack. With the economy the way it is now, I doubt very much we'll be able to make any concessions to you. I don't need any concessions, Fred. The thing is, I need to rezone the property to expand, and I don't think that's going to be easy, especially when it comes time to get permits again. Why? You know the rezoning ads have already come out, and no one has raised any objections, so it should just be a rubber stamp procedure when we vote on it. As for the permits, what makes you think you'll have a problem? Because your permit and zoning manager is sleeping with my wife, and he knows that I know. He looked like a punctured balloon. The scandal when it broke would be very messy. All county departments would get at least a little fallout. Our local paper had an investigative reporter who was so good that national newspapers were after him. He was like a bloodhound smelling fresh blood. He lowered his gaze to the remains of his steak. Inside, the food was a little heavy for him. Are you sure? Video and audio, including a scene where he engages in lewd behavior, talking to my wife, and you can see he's in his office, indecent behavior during work hours and on county property? What do you want? Well, his ass on a silver platter would be nice. Other than that, nothing. At least for now. I have plans for remodeling the house that need to be approved without his knowledge if possible. I'll look into it. There's probably a training seminar the county thinks he should attend. Would 3 days be enough? That would be fine, Fred. I'll wait until after the election, but then I'll burn it. You realize that, don't you? That will give you plenty of time to find an excuse to get rid of him before I start. We parted knowing that our relationship had changed forever. From now on, he would dread waiting for me to ask to see him. Another relationship ruined because of Charlie. The seminar did take place, and I got the contractor to do all the paperwork in his name. They started the next day. Charlie didn't show much interest. I suspect she had other concerns. To her credit, she tried to rekindle our relationship. She made a long speech about how she was bored, that the kids had outgrown her, and she felt less attractive as a woman. She assured me that she made no excuses for her behavior, that she just happened to encounter a predator at a low point in her life, and that it wouldn't happen again. Really? What's going to happen in a few years when the girls grow up and go to college and start building their lives, and you're sitting here staring at four walls, bored out of your mind? You know, instead of ruining our marriage, you could volunteer at some charity organization, join a book club, or get a real job. It would have given you a purpose to put your energy into. But instead, you chose a buddy for fun. How's that working out for you? Here's the corrected version with errors and punctuation fixed. I won't touch you. Our relationship is on life support, and it's only a matter of time until it dies. We won't leave with a bang, more like a whimper. I urge you to think about life after marriage, well, at least for me, because it will happen. She ran out of the room in tears. Over the next few weeks, she became a model wife and mother. We went out as a family, even taking the kids to Disney for a long weekend. I hated it, but the girls, and even Charlie, seemed to enjoy it. The only time things got bad was when we went to bed. I rented a room with 2 double beds, making it clear that we wouldn't be sharing. She was already hinting at divorce when I handed her the separation papers. Knowing that a confrontation would not be pretty, I picked the girls up from school a little early and took them to the park. They were no longer infants and realized something was wrong. They also guessed it was about the other person, they just didn't know which parent was at fault. I gently explained that their mother and I weren't getting along well and I was moving out. They burst into tears, hugging me and begging me to stay. I hugged them until they calmed down. I'm not going far away, my little ones. I could never live without you, but I'm moving out of my house and into a new apartment I built in the basement. Technically, I'll still live in the house, but completely self-contained. That's why I put twin beds in the second bedroom. It's not as nice as your rooms are now, but it will always be there for you. Here are your keys. Just please don't put them in your mother's hand. They were a little amused when I promised that on Saturday they could go shopping and decorate the room however they wanted. Since I didn't know what was in store for them, I sent the girls down to the basement when we got home, telling them to check their room and see what she needed. When Charlie met me at the door, screaming at the top of her lungs, I knew I had made the right decision. She became so loud that the neighbors called the police. On the advice of my lawyer, I never entered the house, even though it was wired for sound and vision. I showed the police officer a copy of the divorce papers. When she asked what caused the argument, I quickly stopped her when I saw a flicker of judgment in her eyes. Yes, I prepared them to make sure things were going smoothly. It may or may not turn into a divorce, but my attorney advised me to do it to document the process. And while you can't ask, this is about adultery, hers, not mine. If you don't believe me, I can show you videos and pictures. She looked at Charlie, who was turning several interesting shades of red. So what? That doesn't mean she has the right to abandon me and our children, officer. Would you mind? I made her follow me around the house and unlocked the gate in the fence. I directed Charlie to follow me and demanded to go in too, but the policeman, showing wisdom, asked her to stay outside for a moment. I showed her the apartment. She was impressed until we opened the door to the girls' room and saw them huddled together on the bed, crying quietly. They rushed into my arms, and I spent several minutes soothing them. Shoo, Mommy's just having a bad day. I'm sure she's calmed down by now, right? The officer nodded grimly and then smiled at the girls. Your dad is right, she's much calmer already. Your daddy and I will go back and talk to her some more to make sure. She said goodbye to them, and we got to talking as soon as we got outside. You must be feeling pretty bad right now, but you got through it. You did the right thing for your girls. I have no advice for you other than to always put your kids first. If my first husband had been half the man you are, I probably wouldn't still hate him. When we returned, Charlie was much calmer and assured the officer that she no longer had to react to her angry outbursts. The fact that she loved me so much was breaking her heart. I'll tell you the same thing I told him, put the welfare of your children first. How you behave during this will determine how they look at both of you for the rest of your lives. And ma'am, this is just a divorce, it's a long way from the divorce stage. I can't answer the question of going to court to get it annulled, you need a lawyer for that. Good luck to both of you. She waved at the officer as she pulled away, then turned to me and hissed, living room, now. She strode into the house, and I took the opportunity to walk around the house, close the gate behind me, and go inside. I put 2 deadbolts and 3 latches on the top door. She would have to use a battering ram to get inside. It was the same on the newly installed lower door, plus plus I chose it for soundproofing. She could stand upstairs and scream at the top of her voice, and we would never know it. The girls stayed with me until bedtime. I assured them that Mom was okay now, and as soon as they came out, I called out to her, "Shut up and listen. In a few seconds, the girls will be coming through the front door. How you behave with them now may determine how close you will be in later life. So, do the same thing I did, humble yourself and think about them." I hung up the phone. The girls never called. Apparently, the night went smoothly. Charlie did hire a lawyer using up the card I'd left her and got a hearing in the judge's office. She was a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes. Seeing families tearing each other apart and constantly using their children as pawns must take a lot out of a person. "Mr. Sears, why did you file for divorce?" asked the judge. "Because, Your Honor, my wife is currently involved with another man by her own admission for at least 9 months now. When I found out about it, she said she had no intention of ending the affair, and I would just have to live with it. Perhaps I could do that if it were just the two of us, but we have 2 girls, ages 11 and 13, and I wasn't sure I wanted to introduce them to this lifestyle at such a tender age. If my wife disputes any of this, I can provide you with video and audio evidence, Your Honor, all of it legally obtained." She looked at Charlie, who hung his head. Turning to me, she seemed to smile slightly. "I heard you moved out of the house, Mr. Sears. How far would you estimate you are from your daughters?" 26 paces, ma'am. I remodeled our basement, turning it into an apartment. It's completely separate from the rest of the house. I have no reason to enter the house, by invitation only, and my wife has the same restrictions, by invitation only, I replied. "Well, it looks like I'm going to have to make some decisions, Mrs. Sears. If you really want to save your marriage, you should reflect on your recent decisions. If this were a divorce, I would advise you to see a counselor. However, this is just a trial separation, and you can get back together at the end of it. So, I don't see the point or find any legal reason to overturn it. So, I wouldn't schedule it. The separation papers were duly filed, so they remain valid after 90 days. He can extend it, revoke it, or file for divorce. I wish you both the best of luck." We were led out of the office and into the parking lot. "You're really mad, aren't you?" she asked. "What a stupid question," I replied. "Yes, but not to that extent. The thing I feel the most is sadness. I always thought the only way for us to be apart was for one of us to hold the other's hand as we walked by. Now I know that will never happen. My anger wants me to tell you that I wasted my years with you, but we have girls, so it will never be a waste of time." I was in the car before she could respond. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her sitting in the car, sobbing. In past times, I would have hugged her and told her that no matter what happened, we would always be there for each other. Now I just sighed and turned right around. For the next 3 weeks, we coexisted, her upstairs, me downstairs. Charlie got upset when the girls refused to let her into my apartment, tried to pressure them, but they held firm. Finally, one day, I knocked on her door. She seemed surprised to see me. I hadn't seen or spoken to her since the trial. Before she could speak, I gave her instructions, follow my lead. The girls learned how to cook on the gas grill and made us dinner. So, follow me and don't ruin their dinner, I commanded. She obediently followed me. The girls, wearing big aprons and chef's caps they had gotten somewhere, hugged her and led her to our picnic table where we fed them herb-roasted chicken, grilled vegetables, corn on the cob, and tomato salad. They even had a dessert, a cheesecake they made from a mix. Charlie, to her credit, didn't say anything bad, complimented the girls on their cooking skills, and helped her put the dishes away. Echo showed her around the apartment, including their room. Marissa had made a habit of sleeping downstairs most of the time. Echo only stayed upstairs on weekends. I knew the apartment was much smaller than what they were used to, so as a compromise, I limited their access to the man cave. They hooked up a game system to a monster TV, and on Fridays and Saturdays, they had friends over for the night, camping out on air mattresses. Mostly they were girls, but sometimes boys would come over for the evening, and a mom or two would stay with them until the boys left. Sometimes it was Charlie. Most of the time, it was pizza, but every once in a while, the girls would grill, under my supervision, mostly hamburgers and hot dogs, but if there wasn't much chicken or pork. Summer was approaching, school was almost out, so I splurged and bought a huge in-ground pool. That made them more popular than ever. Most parents knew about our life, but never commented. Some moms hinted, and one outright said she wouldn't mind getting involved. I thanked them as graciously as possible and promised to keep them in mind if I was ever without a date. It pissed Charlie off, especially when they did it in her presence. One night, after the parents and kids had left, she told me off hard. "What were you thinking, that climbed into your lap while you were eating?" "Do you know how ashamed I was?" she said. "Not really. Do you think it's as embarrassing as finding out your spouse is having fun with someone else, and all friends know and even provide alibis and places to further destroy the marriage? If so, I can empathize. Also, we may have been a little close, but it was pretty crowded at the picnic table, and her daughter and both of mine were right next to us," I said. Charlie looked shocked. For all her carefully thought-out plans, she hadn't expected to have to deal with a situation like this. Of course, it was all nonsense. I wasn't going to do anything that would serve as a weapon for her in the divorce when it came through, but it still felt good to pull her chain. I tried to avoid any contact with Charlie, though I still monitored her phone calls and videotaped her daily life. Apparently, the fact that she had 2 lovers anytime she wanted and none for 3 months kept her busy. After a while, it was funny, but in many ways, it was also sad. After her release, she often cried in her sleep. She still had her cell phone and didn't know that I had put it on a wiretap and removed the restrictions from her regular phone. I remember the shock on her face when the telemarketer called her, and she hurriedly called everyone she could remember to make sure the phone was completely serviceable. She took it as a sign that I was thawing out and things were getting better, not as a death blow to our marriage. If she thought about it, the fact that I no longer cared whether or not she was communicating with her lover would make her think twice. The election was over, the county manager resigned, and the new appointee promised the commissioners that he would clean the fat out of all county budgets. Bob was quietly let go. He caved to the manager and addressed the county commissioners. They met him in the conference room and showed him the clip I had given them where he goes into great detail about what he's going to do to Charlie the next time they get together. "That's it, Bob. The owner of that video has threatened to make it public and sue the district for allowing the manager to have an affair and use the district's computers and phones for games, unusual games. All we have to do to make this stop is fire you without a recommendation. If we don't, we'll all be embarrassed, probably have to pay that person a lot of money to keep the matter quiet, and we'll make sure you get as many charges as our attorney thinks we can bring. Your chances of ever working in another county or municipality will be reduced to 0, and jobs in the private sector in any management capacity will be very, very hard to find. Do us all a favor, Bob, consider the lesson learned and walk away," they said. He had no choice, and the local paper didn't even write about his departure. Basically, he just disappeared. Charlie called me, wavering between anger and remorse. "Did you have to do that? He has little kids. How is he going to support them? Shouldn't he have thought about all this before he decided sleeping with you was a good idea?" she asked. "And I feel sorry for his kids, but his wife has a pretty good job right now, and she should be okay with child support," I said. "His wife is a stay-at-home mom." "Not anymore. I think she has an accounting degree, and a local company hired her pretty quickly. I hear it's a pretty good job. Who would hire a man who hasn't worked in 6 years and give him such a good job?" "Me," I said before hanging up. Bob's wife was a chubby, pretty woman with a perpetual smile on her face. It took me shattering her world to finally knock the hues off of it. What am I going to do now? This was the only income we had. How am I going to take care of my kids? Her oldest was in school, and the 3-year-old was busy trying to climb on top of me while I tickled her. "You're going to go to work for me." Rumor has it I'm not a bad boss, even if you don't want to. I'll help you. It's not my fault he betrayed your marriage and put you in this position, but guilty or not, I feel responsible. This offer doesn't commit you to anything. My kids are older and already know, but it still affects them deeply. I'm doing my best to minimize the pain, but I can't take it away. That's in case you want to leave. Of course, if you want to support him, I will pray for you, but I have to tell you that it all seems too smooth and practical for this to be his first time. I thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the information I had to give you. If you decide to get a divorce, I can help you with the proof, I said. I left her trying to hold back sobs as she hugged her daughter. She called me 3 days later in a tight, controlled voice. She told me that he wasn't going to tell her he'd been fired or that it was all about cheating until she threw it in his face. I thought he was going to hit me, so I smirked and told him, "Go ahead, the bruises will make it easy for you to go to jail and for me to get a restraining order." I told him it would be a fitting end to a horrible situation. He ran out, and I haven't seen him since. But he doesn't have the money because I cleared all the accounts the same day you told me what was going on. And it wasn't done out of spite, well, not much anyway. He has 2 young children, and they have needs. I wasn't going to let them lack anything because of his mistakes. I have enough money to live on for 3 months. Is that job offer still on the table? She started work the following week. I was thrilled to see how nimble she was, and we agreed that she would be in the office half the time and work from home the rest of the time. This helped her tremendously when it came to childcare issues. My staff were not idiots, and when Charlie's picture disappeared from my desk and the girls' and I appeared in its place, they understood and even expressed cautious condolences. All but one. Misty despised Charlie because she thought Misty was trying to hit on me and made a huge scene at the company party. Misty left in tears, and I kicked Charlie's ass the next morning when she sobered up. Looking back, I realized it was right after she started having an affair with Bob. Transmission, I guess. If she was spinning it, I threatened to cut Charlie off from work for a month financially before she came to the office and apologized to Misty. Misty accepted, and they hugged to show there were no hard feelings. I was able to see most of their faces, and the pat on the back looked like they were looking for a soft spot for a knife. She walked into my office smirking. "I just found out you can fire me if you want, boss, but I'm glad you're too good a man for that. You didn't notice it, but she was always so damn cruel to women when you weren't around," she continued. "We're going to split the cards on who goes after you first. I never told you, but I worked as a dealer at a casino on the coast when I was a student, and if I get my hands on the cards, those don't stand a chance. I like romantic movies, French food, and long, slow massages with warm aromatic oils." Misty was a trim redhead, confident, and knew how to dress to get noticed without violating office standards. She was 12 years younger than me, in a serious relationship with a nice guy who I assumed she would marry sooner or later. I had already promised to walk her down the aisle and pay for the honeymoon within reason, so I knew she had no serious intentions. I shocked her by responding with joke after joke. "Since we were alone, I guess I'll go along with that. I've always wondered if your rug matches your curtains," I teased. Her hand flashed to her mouth, and she giggled, running to the door. Turning around, she looked me straight in the eye. It would have fit, but I took the carpet off, deciding I like smooth floors better. "If you don't believe me, ask Jerry." I promised her that would be our first topic of conversation the next time we were together and listened as she laughed all the way down the hall. It made me grin the rest of the day, and I wasn't as serious as I used to be. The other ladies noticed this, and Misty must have blabbed because every time I got moody or angry, one or the other would say something to lift my spirits. I realized the situation was out of control when our 60-year-old secretary told me she was from a different generation and how I felt about shaggy wool rugs. Charlie was despairing, climbing the walls alone, no lover, no husband, no outlet except for lunches with her friends.